So I'll call to order the special meeting of Glendale City Council. Roll call, please.
Council members: Friedman.
Here.
Garpetian.
Here.
Jarian.
Here.
Sinanian.
Here.
Mayor Devine.
Here. First item, please, or your report. I'm sorry.
The agenda for the June 14, 2016 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Friday, June 10, 2016 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Before you is the Director of Community Development regarding considering amendment to add additional development scenario in the request for a proposal, RFP, to preserve and develop city-owned property located at the former Rockhaven Sanitarium, 2713 Honolulu Avenue. Parcel numbers 5610-024-900 through 910. 1A is the City Council motion to note and file. 1B is the City Council motion to allow for an additional development scenario of the city-owned property known as Rockhaven.
Thank you, Mr. Kasakian. Before we get to that item, we have a very special presentation to make this afternoon, so I'd like to call Dan Hargrove to explain the wonderful happening.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor, members of Council. I am very pleased and very proud to be before you on this surprise presentation today. Yesterday, June 13th, two of our integrated waste staff members, Herman Mencia and Daniel Quiros, who is a GYA employee that works for integrated waste, came across an accident on the corner of San Fernando and Adams. The white vehicle you see pictured in the photograph was smashed up against a tree and was in fire. The windows were heavily tinted, and there were a few other witnesses that were looking at the circumstances, trying to see if there was a driver inside. There was no activity in the vehicle. They smashed the window, which actually made the flames burst and the fire grow. At that point, the witnesses backed off, but Herman and Daniel quickly rushed to the scene. They opened the door and found the driver, who was unconscious in the vehicle, pulled him from the vehicle to Adams Street, a safe distance away. Police were arriving on scene just that moment, checked his vitals, found that the driver was still alive, and said if it wasn't for these two gentlemen, that person would have probably died. So I'm very pleased to present Herman Mencia and Daniel Quiros.
So I guess it's clear for me to say, or true for me to say, that we're in the presence of real heroes. Thank you. I have proclamations for each of you, or commendations, which I would like to read and will present to Daniel Quiros and Herman Mencia in recognition for outstanding work and dedication in assisting members of our community. I commend your passion and aspiration to go beyond the call of duty in order to protect the safety of our residents. I thank you for serving as a shining example to all. On behalf of the City of Glendale, I wish you continued success, and I thank you from the bottom of, I think, all of our hearts. Thank you. And especially... Make us proud.
Madam Mayor, can we briefly hear from, before you go away, please?
Gentlemen.
We would like to hear from you
Daniel?
briefly. So,
Herman, did you want to say a few words about the event? Or do you just want to kind of forget it? No, you don't.
There's nothing really much to say, just that we're at the right place at the right time, and we're grateful we could help whenever you can.
You guys were the right people at the right place at the right time.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That matters, yeah.
Thank
It
you.
matters to be the right people at the right place.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, yeah.
No worries. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And now we'll take the item, the Rockhaven former sanitary. Mr. Ochoa?
Yes, ma'am. We have just actually a brief report because the decision before you is rather straightforward, and it concerns the existing request for proposal that is outstanding today. The council had approved an RFP to go out onto the street with two basic development criteria for adaptive reuse, one being a medical facility to be used as a medical campus ostensibly, or to be utilized as a lifestyle center, meaning a mix of lower density residential with some retail in a boutique kind of fashion. Also this spring, the council had asked, it was requested by one council member, seconded by another, that the criteria would come back to allow for a third development alternative, being the utilization of the western third, generally speaking, of the site for strictly residential development, and the eastern two-thirds be recrafted essentially as a park, making use of the historic buildings, as has been the directive of the council to adaptively reuse them, and utilizing proceeds from the development of the western third to the benefit of the eastern two-thirds of the site, doing a shell and core rehab of the historic buildings and making the eastern two-thirds into a park. So that analysis was prepared. It was pointed out by council that the modeled pro forma prepared by Kaiser Meissen Associates did have comparable values that were not entirely reflective of the Glendale market, and so we revised that and had Kaiser Meissen take a closer look at their own work. They have done that, and I believe now they have a model on two different options contained in your staff report that better reflects what the Glendale market is, the attractiveness of the Glendale market. We originally had modeled out four different scenarios or options, one for an 18-unit market rate single-family home development, one for a series of 38 townhouses, all to take place again on that western third, and then two larger scale developments. But those larger scale developments we felt on the outset were just totally incompatible and would not receive any kind of support from the community, let alone the council. And so those were pushed aside. And it also should be pointed out that neither one of those actually paid for themselves. So what you're left with actually is two rather interesting development opportunities. They incorporate their prevailing wage jobs, because essentially you would be giving the site to a developer. They would be building these market rate units and using the residual land value to do the improvements, about $3 million worth of improvement on the historic buildings, about another $1 million worth of improvement to make the eastern two-thirds of Rockhaven ADA accessible. And then therein lies a fork in the road for the council. If you were to move forward with the single-family 18-unit market rate units, what the analysis that was prepared comes back at is that the supportable land value, or the residual, is about $566,000 negative. And you see in your staff report, we transpose those two numbers. The math at the bottom line is still the same, but we originally had cost over value, and so we flip-flopped those. And you see the development value at $13.6 million. You see the projected cost at $14.17, negative $566. However, on the townhouse project, 38 units, about 18 of them at 1,460 square feet, another 20 of them at 1,800 square feet. There is a supportable land value, a residual of about almost $1.5 million. That is good, because our model for the cost to create a park on the eastern two-thirds of the site would, depending on the type of park the council wants to see, be anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million. And so if you wanted to, again, the question today is whether or not to amend the RFP criteria to allow this distinct development reuse concept into the RFP process. So you would be instructing us to advise the development community that there is a third line of adaptive reuse that could be employed, again, residential development on the eastern or on the western third, and adaptive reuse for park use on the western two-thirds. Again, none of these models have anything to do with the actual maintenance cost of the park, and depending on what the council wanted to see by way of improvements, a passive park versus an active park, you may have enough money to do that, you may not. But that would be borne out by the proposals that would be returned. At this point, based on developer interest, you know that we have extended administratively the RFP deadline to July 14th. If the council were of a mind to revise the criteria, then you might also want to extend that deadline out into August or not. At this point, there's still a month left for interested parties to put together a proposal. But with that, if you have any specific questions, Mr. Lanzafame or I can answer those for you.
Okay, are there questions from council before I ask the speakers?
Specific question. Mr. Ochoa, in those two options, option 1, option 2, the 18 market rate units and the 38 market rate townhomes, does the obligation to maintain and to rehab those historic structures on the eastern two-thirds fall upon the city or the developer?
That would very likely be the city. Ultimately, that would be a function of the proposals, but at this point, it would be envisioned to be the city as a park setting, as a park property.
And they may throw off some money for us depending on which.
Depending on what you want to do with them, ultimately, sure.
Depending on which one.
Excuse me, Mr. Ajari, just to be very, very clear. In the pro forma, we did have some money for the developer to rehab to a core and shell standard, as Mr. Ochoa had said. So there will be some rehab done by the developer, but then he turns it over to the city. Depending on what you want to do with those buildings, we'll have to build out some tenant improvements.
Okay, then what we're currently, we've got the medical related facility, we've got the boutique lifestyle facility. This third one is what, the housing option? Is that what we would call it, or
Housing/park?
The idea being that the developer would build the housing and then develop the park to, we've got in our pro forma, a minimal standard, turn the park over to the city. And then the city would maintain and operate the park. In the first two situations, the developer would maintain the park, would operate the park, would have more control. We would have less control, but we would negotiate some access, some level of access, depending on what scenario for the community.
is there a housing component envisioned in the original two, medical and boutique lifestyle?
Well, in the boutique lifestyle, yes. In the medical, there are some housing facilities, but again, those would be not available for the general public. They would be patients of that practice.
And would any decision that we make today affect the criteria rating system, rating scale that we've already adopted?
No. Okay. We would still use that same rating scale.
Thank you. Councilmember
Yes.
Garpetti.
Sir Lanzafame, I have a couple of questions. The current RFP, there is no park component in it. It's the lifestyle. The medical one is basically a private use. There may be a strip of land in the front portion of it.
Correct.
But the lifestyle, thank you for asking that question, Mr. Nigerian, is the lifestyle does not take the right away from any developer to build on the westerly side of the site as a residential development. Am I correct? With lifestyle, they can still build.
Correct.
Okay.
I think what you would see in the lifestyle component would be some light amount of residential development, cottage-type units on the west, and then the adaptive reuse and re-tenanting of the properties on the east. And at that point, depending on, and again, we still don't know if it would be a lease or an outright sale, the utilization of the existing open space, presuming all the buildings stay, for lack of for argument's sake, all those buildings stay, the existing open space that is there remains open space accessible by the public. This wrinkle would go further and say not only is that open space open to the public, but those buildings would then become public buildings to be maintained by the city.
Right. Okay. Have we done a similar exercise for that option, if the lifestyle option, for if they build a bungalow, how many units, the cost of building it, the cost of leasing it, the cost of rehabbing the current buildings and renting it out, and what would city get from? Have we done a similar study? I'm surprised we've done this study because I was the one who wanted to add that park component into this mix. And I never asked for low-density housing, high-density housing on the vacant side. All I was saying was because I voted against the RFP for this specific reason, and I asked one of my colleagues to make this motion to add the park component into the RFP. So if there is a developer out there that wants to rehab the existing buildings, turn it into a park, give it back to the city, whether or not I don't know who's going to maintain it. We can negotiate on that, and do whatever everybody else was going to do on the vacant site. If there's a guy out there, if there's a developer out there who wants to do that, to have that option. This exercise is totally. We can talk about numbers later, but I have my numbers here. The numbers do not match what's going on in Glendale, even with the new revised one. But I don't want to create this issue that now the city is trying to force a developer, or bring a developer to build 40 units or 30 units on the vacant site. Well, all I was asking was to add the option of turning the existing site into a park and give it back to the city, if there's a developer out there. That's all I wanted to do. Now, if I didn't communicate it right, I'll take that it's my bad. But I didn't want to say, let them build 18 units or 20 units and rehab the existing buildings and give it back to us. That was not my thing.
Certainly, we appreciate that, but I think that the point's well taken, but I think that the exercise that we see going on here is that if you are going to have those, the adaptively reused historic buildings be used for a public purpose, they are community rooms, they are meeting rooms, they're classrooms. And if they are ultimately utilized with the same frequency as our community centers today, competing for rentals, as it were, well, that would yield one set of numbers. If you have, and I think what you see reflected here in terms of the residential development is probably a good and fair assessment of what the minimum level of development could be in order to make it all pencil out. If, on the other hand, the properties, the historic properties, are rehabbed and ultimately utilized by a private interest for a private purpose, and thus the city doesn't have that obligation to further maintain, to do the tenant build out or maintain them on an ongoing basis, well, that does give you possibly more latitude on what you have to build on the residential side to generate the residual. Because what the council has said throughout is, well, most of the council has said throughout, is that the city isn't necessarily looking to get $8 million back out of the site. The city could very well bury, and if you recall from the RFQ process that was done, the city had been willing, and the committee even almost was willing, to allow that entire $8 million investment to be sunk on that site. And so in doing so, I think when folks say, well, you should invest more money into a park on the site, I think that's where the rub begins, because if this model were to play out, well, then that presupposes that the city will have already invested $8 million into this site.
Sure. Now, what all I'm saying is, I don't want to give this exercise to any developer and say, these are my numbers, take it or leave it, or use these numbers. Let the park portion to be part of the RFP, and let the developers decide if they want to. There may not be anybody who would want to turn this into a park and build any number of units on the vacant site. And we may have 10 applications for lifestyle, basically a use for it. But add the park component into the RFP. That's all I wanted to do. There may be somebody out there, somebody with a lot of money, and say, okay, I want to build this thing, rehab the existing buildings, give it back to the city. City, you manage it, whatever. We can negotiate. And on the vacant site, I want to build a community center, for example. There may be somebody out there. They may not, but the option right now is not there.
Well, I
Option
think-
is
yeah.
only lifestyle or medical. That's why I was saying
That's
to
what I
add
think this
that to it.
exercise could allow you to do. I mean, we're here now for the council to direct us on whether or not you want to revise the policy. So we do this as a means of saying, most practically speaking, the development community that is out there today, again, most practically, is going to be of a residential nature. So if they look at our numbers and they say, nah, I can see it makes sense to me at 38, but I'm smarter, better, wiser, better detail, better, I have a greater opportunity for sales. I don't have to build 38. I can build something less. By all means, so do it. The easiest thing today to do would be to say, expand the RFP criteria. And to go further to your specific point, sir, would be then expand the criteria to not just have a residential development component, but an absolutely, positively public component development. And have somebody say, we're going to do just what you say, we'll donate a community center on that western piece and rehab the eastern piece. Is that possible? I don't know, but as you indicate, apparently no one knows. But the point being, if that's what the council wants, we can go that route. Again, the easiest thing to do today would be go ahead and take all comers.
So can I ask Mr. Garpetti a question
Yes.
so I understand what you're proposing? Well, first, I think that saying that we're okay with the developer making this into a park, great, of course, we should add that to the RFP. But are you suggesting, is that what you're suggesting, or are you suggesting that we, wait a second, are you suggesting that we just go ahead and fund a park as a city and not have a developer come in and try to build something to pay for part of it?
That's not what I'm suggesting.
So can you clarify for me, because I'm having trouble following what you're saying.
I will do that gladly. Right now, the options are either a medical use, that somebody can come in and take over the entire site, pay the city $7, $8, $9 million, and take it over, buy the land and do whatever they want. Or is a lifestyle,
Which could include a park, right? I mean, it could include a park. We talked about
I'm not. That could very well.
I'm
Why are
trying to
people
understand
laughing?
what
I'm trying
he's
to
asking.
hear what's going on.
No, I understand. That could very well be. That could include a park as well. I don't know. That's not part of the RFP. I don't think that's part of the RFP. The developer may add a little section and say this is a park or half of the existing site.
Right.
It's up to them. It could be. But the option of the existing site to be turned into a park by the developer with their cost,
By a private developer.
by a private developer, and giving it back to the city.
In exchange for what? What would they want? If we
In exchange for everything else that is going on, I mean, the lifestyle one, what are they going to do with the existing site?
So you're
Nothing else would
anticipating
change.
that empty lot, that they would sort of develop something on the empty lot, residential?
They can bring you a proposal. It could be a supermarket. It could be a 10 units. It could be a community center. I don't want to do this exercise and tell them you can build 38 units here, and this is how you're going to make it.
Right, okay.
Pencil it out.
So it's up to
I just
them.
want to have that park option into the RFP. That's all. Nothing else. I
Okay,
mean,
no, I understand. I would
to
go
be
along
clear,
with that.
for the record, what you see here is not the sworn to gospel as to what somebody needs to build. This is a demonstration that if we went and did housing on the western third, at what point, how many units might you have to build on the western third to get to a point where you have enough money to do the eastern two-thirds? That's all. Again, if somebody came out and said, I could build one unit and sell it for however much money, that would be enough, so be it. But as Mr. Garpetian aptly points out, that is not allowed under the RFP today. Today, the RFP that is out there, criteria, is as a medical use and as a lifestyle use that will have some residential on the western third and have basically an open plaza area for the entire area to the two-thirds where there are the historic buildings. But again, it does not include the idea of doing something separate and singular on that western piece.
that's exactly what
Why
I'm
are we?
saying.
It seems like we're going back and forth.
Right.
Back and forth.
I
I
think-
get the feeling everyone supports this.
Right. Well-
Why don't we just put out for a vote? It gives more options.
Well, we'll have to see what let's listen to
Yeah,
the...
yeah, no, absolutely, of
yeah.
course.
But I think the
I
bottom line
don't hear a
is...
disagreement here.
The bottom line is simply that we're adding another option for the RFP, and that within that option is a park component. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is it.
The park component would be taken over by the city, run by the city, and open to the public.
Is that
Maybe.
are we down
Unless-
to that level of
unless-
specificity?
that level of granularity.
Unless the developer decides that they want to do that, right?
You're
Correct.
expanding the options.
Okay, all right. So are we ready to listen to the speakers?
Love to hear the speaker.
Yes?
Madam Mayor?
Absolutely.
How many
Okay,
time would you
all
like?
right. So we'll begin.
Mayor Devine?
Oh, I'm sorry.
3, 2.
Let's give them 2 minutes each. We have 7 cards, so that's...
Okay.
Okay, so 2 minutes each? Are we good with that? Okay. All right, first, Becky Raghavachari, I hope I pronounced that right, and Sharon will be next.
Hello. Hello, my name is Becky Raghavachari. I'm 12 years old and an avid Rockhaven supporter. As a Girl Scout, I have a particular reason to support Rockhaven. While Rockhaven was a sanitarium, the Girl Scouts would come around and sing carols during Christmas time and even host the occasional tea. So I wish to preserve this lovely place as it has memories that live with people for their entire lives. 2 years ago, during a community meeting discussing Rockhaven with Scott Ochoa and a few members of the city staff, all community members in attendance voiced their opposition of housing units on the property. At the conclusion of the meeting, Mr. Ochoa promised the group, myself included, that the city would come back to us before the planning moved on and a request for projects was open. It has been 2 years since then, and the city has opened the request for proposals without coming back to us. I feel misled, and as the city's promise was revoked. A Girl Scout always lives to be honest, and the city isn't living up to this standard.
Thank you. Sharon Raghavachari.
Hello, I'm Sharon Raghavachari. I served 7 years on the Crescenta Valley Town Council, and I'm currently a steering committee member on the Crescenta Valley Community Association. That is my daughter, who I'm very proud of.
Yes. As well.
I also was in attendance at that meeting, and we were very vocal about not having residential units on the property. We have more than enough units coming into La Crescenta and Montrose. We have where the mix currently, former mix, I should say, currently has a proposal for housing on that site. We have had more on Montrose. Now we're having more on Honolulu. We don't want that in our area. We don't need extra townhomes. We don't need extra apartments. We don't need extra development of housing. The property was purchased as a community asset. It needs to stay a community asset. It doesn't need to be penciled out for a developer for housing. I think we were quite clear with that, and I don't understand why it keeps coming back to housing. I understand the city wants to recoup money, put it someplace else in another area of Glendale, but we don't want the housing, period.
Joanna Lankhorst. Don't worry about it. Just I know you. Lankhorst.
I married into it. It's just not my fault. Council members, Mayor Devine, it is such a pleasure for me to see you sitting right there. Joanna Linkhorst with the Friends of Rockhaven. This property currently is not privately owned and deserves to be protected. Interiors, exteriors, the gardens, not lost to a trend like a boutique lifestyle center. If we preserve it now, we won't need to later on restore it. Please search for a proposal that offers the most open space, the most historic preservation, and the most public access, not the most financial return. The adobes, one of which we were at today, are not subjected to sale or adaptive reuse. This property deserves the same kind of consideration. $8.25 million 8 years ago was not sunk into a property. It was invested for the city of Glendale, the people of all of Glendale, to enjoy this historic spot. I speak for 300 member households of the Friends of Rockhaven, as well as the people who were on the North Glendale Community Plan Advisory Committee on August 17th, 2009, who said that they wanted more cultural and community uses than commercial uses. It said when a proposal is chosen, then there will be public commentary time. Public commentary time has been for the last 8 years. We would like a park. We need parking for the park. I went driving by today, and the streets were already all parked up. If we build anything on the western portion, there is no parking. If we build housing and we put subterranean parking there, there's a well on the front part of that property that faces Honolulu. So I'm certain that developers would be able to overcome any of that, but the best use of this property is what it was initially purchased for, and that's to serve the community, all of Glendale, and show it its history. Thank you.
Joanne, and Linkhorst is a beautiful last name.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question of the speaker?
Yes, of
Joanne?
course. Joanne?
Yes, thank you.
So we're focusing on the western third. What sort of development, if any, would you and the Friends of Rockhaven accept?
It's challenging for me because I know that people in the community would like to see a boutique hotel. So I would like you guys to open this proposal up, not just to specifically housing and a park or a boutique lifestyle center or a medical facility, but open it up, as he said, another option to just whoever wants to submit. Give us your ideas and let's see what wonderful things come in. I personally, from having been on the property over and over, speaking to so many people, would think that historic use, a museum, restaurant, community center, we have art people coming out of the woodwork to be able to do art on the property, community centers. One lady wants to do art therapy, which would be the most perfect thing for this property to bring its heritage back into it. It has always been parking for the property, and it would make the most sense to me that it would remain parking so nobody was trying to crowd out Honolulu or Hermosa. And I believe that there is a possibility to make that financially happen if you find the right people.
I'm sorry, did I hear you right? You said boutique hotel?
I know that there are some people that are interested. I don't know if they are. I just know that they're interested. I have just heard this.
That's
I know that there are other people out there that are interested in things that aren't so very specific. So I would like to ask you to please open it up to more ideas.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Joanne. Thank you, Joanne. Elizabeth Nelson?
So, is the boutique hotel part of the lifestyle that could be implemented in there?
I suppose it could, but the problem is that we've already done that assessment of hotels. We actually had a hotel study and tried to get a hotel to look at this particular site on the west and possibly have some kind of spa on the east, and they said no. There just isn't enough critical mass in that area because it's a low-density, low-development area.
Right, so even if there's a franchise that would want to go there, it would be like 5 or 6 floors hotel, and I don't think anybody's going to support that.
That's correct, sir.
All right, thank you.
Elizabeth?
Hi, it's Elizabeth Nelson. When this property was bought, the original intention and commitment by the City Council at that time was to maintain the history for our future and to keep it as a park. What I know is true is that for the preteens and teens in that area, there is no facility for them to go to after school. No Boys and Girls Club. The Y costs money. A lot of the people in that area do not have it. They need some place to go where they can hang out and do like a Boys and Girls Club where they can play games, do their homework, get help. They have that in the central part of Glendale. I know that. And if somebody's allowed to build a medical facility, lifestyle, boutiques, whatever kind of public revenue service, have we looked into the ripple out, the effect it's going to have on our utilities, the sewers, the water, the fire department, the police department, etc.? Whereas if we keep it as a park and for the preteens, the teens, and maybe senior citizens and not-for-profits, then the parking space is already available on the property. Because otherwise, those people, particularly around the holidays, are going to be parking in, Buena Park. It's a problem.
No matter what project we would do, we would have those studies, wouldn't we, Mr. Ochoa?
You'd have to do an environmental impact report because the moment you start to park folks, especially on Hermosa on the north side, rest assured the people that live across the street are going to say, wait a second, you're taking out my parking. I mean, you are going to have a situation where truly the impact is going to be felt by somebody. So the goal is how do you get a adaptive reuse that does all the things that people are talking about. Preserve history, develop open space, make it accessible to the public. All of those things are the criteria that regardless if you expand today or not, are all part of the RFP.
I thought I saw Mary O'Keefe here. Is she in? Yes. Hi, Mary. I was thinking when she was speaking about the firehouse and how you have that up in La Crescenta for the kids, where they gather and do exactly what she's talking about.
That's not walking distance.
Thank you. Shudi Deveron?
Hi. Well, I completely support Joanne. What she said makes sense. I also think that you're not really looking at the whole picture here. This is a part of our history. And there are ways that historical properties can return some of the expenses it takes to maintain them. There are lots of programs out there. There's the Passport to History, on which I've been to almost every site. You collect little stamps, and it's put on by the Adobe in Calabasas, but it's a great program. And they ask for donations in the book, so people that visit the site ahead of time in trying to gather all this historical information can also leave a donation. It's not written in stone, it's just an expected donation. But that's one way, and I happen to know of like 5 other ways in which historical properties can recoup some of the costs, and along with having docents on the property, of maintaining the property. I know that with Rockhaven it's a little bit of a challenge because some of the buildings need repair. But anyway, so I really am here to say I think Joanne's ideas are great. I think you should open them up. And I'm willing to hear, though, but I really would like to see the historical aspect of that property preserved. I mean, history, once it's gone, 100 years from now, you can't go, oh, over here used to be a sanitarium that a woman in 1921, of all things, started for other women, which in itself is incredible. You can't go back to it once it's gone. And we don't have a lot of historical sites up here. So it would be really, really nice to have this 50 years from now and go, wow, Glendale, they were such a forward-thinking city that they preserved this, and now my grandchildren are looking at it, and they're going, wow, really, a woman did this? I mean, I think it's a big deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Ochoa, in our RFPs that we've written so far, the historic integrity of Rockhaven is absolutely mentioned, and that we want to preserve that.
Yeah, that's right, ma'am.
Any way we can.
Dedication
Option number
to
1.
preservation, creation of open space, accessibility are the 2 highest rated or 2 highest weighted criteria. And so I absolutely agree that there are ways to do historic preservation. And in this case, again, whether you expand the criteria or not, it's through adaptive reuse. Taking that which is historic, repairing it, bringing it back to a level where it can be meaningfully employed into the community of today. That is the truest and best testament in the way that the legacy of this property will live on. Nobody is talking or has talked about raising the site.
Hey, Sharon Weissman, followed by Jesse Shelton and Brandon Ludwig.
Thank you, Mayor Devine, council members, and staff. I'm Sharon Weissman from Far North Glendale, speaking today as an individual. Opening up the RFP is a good idea, adding more things, but the best alternative, which is the entire property as a historic park, is still not being considered. The property should be considered as an investment by the city, not just a drain, not just an expense. It continues to make no sense to me for the city to be getting rid of open park space at the same time you're actively looking to acquire different park space. If the city retains ownership of the complex, it can be gradually developed as funds become available. The eventual fate of the property does not need to be decided immediately. I urge the council to either open the RFP to all options or cancel it entirely. With the number of new housing units already in the pipeline in the city can afford to slow the pace of development. After all this new housing fills up and the development impact fee improvements recently outlined have been completed, the situation can be reassessed. In a few years, it might be apparent, and I think it probably would be, that a historic park at Rockhaven, the entire complex, the open western area too, is critically needed. If the property has been sold off, that won't be possible. Let the community absorb the development already approved before letting go of this valuable asset. By the way, I want to caution council members that it's been my experience that consultants are often brought in to confirm what management has already decided. You don't really get independent opinions. You get the opinion that has been paid for. And thank you for your time, but please consider you don't need to develop every piece of Glendale on your watch. You can leave a little for the next generation and just maintain and save the historic integrity of this property. Thank you.
Jesse and Brandon. Shelton and Budwick.
Hello. So I'm pretty sure we're going to say what you've been hearing all along. But we were at the reenactment at Rockhaven, and we got to learn about everybody that stayed there, what it meant. And I understand putting houses there, or whatever you guys want to do with developing it, and bringing people to Montrose and La Crescenta, because it really is a great place. But I think that'd be touching something that should just kind of be there to be appreciated.
Just one thing to add is we can't really decide or do anything like that, but we can provide an opinion. And my personal opinion is that we respect and the developers respect what we have here. It's history. It's what we have to the city. It's Glendale's own. And we should be respecting it in some way or the other.
Thank you. I just had a thought when you said appreciate, and I thought about depreciate. And we have to think also about the fact that Rockhaven is depreciating. It is slowly deteriorating and kind of showing the age of the property. So it seems like if we want to preserve and remember it, perhaps we should be doing something now. Grant Michaels, just my thoughts. Grant Michaels, followed by Elizabeth Hines. Dean.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Grant Michaels. I'm the president of the Montrose Verdugo City Spar Heights Neighborhood Association. We and Rockhaven is within the boundaries of our neighborhood association. We have been engaged and active on this issue from the beginning. Our board is supportive of the expansion of the scope of the RFP. We encourage the consideration of a community benefit throughout the conversation of Rockhaven. All of the current concept plans do have a very limited scope of a community benefit. This new proposal expands the idea of a community benefit. We would encourage you to expand the RFP and consider going beyond opening the scope of the RFP to new ideas and look for options to come from the development community as well as the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Hines, followed by Ella. Ella, got to write larger for Mayor Devine. Okay, Elizabeth, your name, please.
My name is Elizabeth Heim, and when Rockhaven started out, it was a place where people who were sick or who were mentally ill could come and relax. They could come and relax. They would just have a good time and heal. And lots of memories were made there. Some stories and memories that should be passed around. But if you build apartments, and if you choose to build apartments and houses on top of that, those stories wouldn't be able to be told. And also, Rock Haven should just stay what it was meant to be, a place where people can come and relax, where they don't have to worry about anything, where they just walk and talk and have a fun time.
Thank you. Thank you. Ella? Summers? Okay.
Rock Haven is an amazing historical site, and if you take it down and fill it up with houses or anything, next generations won't be able to see the historical site. They won't be able to know they won't be able to know how people were helped there, and yeah.
Thank you, Ella. Lucine, Ricky, followed by Rita Zabayan.
When the city of Glendale first purchased Rock Haven, it led the community to believe that they would move the Montrose Library to the Rock Haven and expand the fire department. I understand at the time the economy went bad and the fundings were lost, but the economy has recovered and the people are willing to help. My Girl Scouts troop recently planted a garden at Rock Haven, showing that people want Rock Haven to be taken care of and not replaced with more houses. Rock Haven is also a key to the beginning of Montrose and the Foothill community. It's the only one of dozens of mental hospitals in this area that has survived till this day, and also plays a key component in the women's history. Rock Haven has ties with many people that share their stories. They even have times with, if I could say, some celebrities, like the Monroe family. Marilyn Monroe's mother lived there for many years. And now I propose that the city of Glendale preserve Rock Haven and build a park where people can go to rest and not have to go home. Glendale doesn't need more homes and more shopping parks because we already have many, and Glendale doesn't need to be even more crowded. Thank you.
Rita Zobayan, followed by Mike Morgan.
Thank you. I'm asking the City Council that they take a visionary view of Rock Haven. The history of the place is very, very important. You see young ladies here learning about the history, and if that's taken away in any form, I understand that the council is saying that the facade of the place will be kept, but there's more that you can do with that land that promotes history, and specifically women's history, at a time where this council could be visionary. We are looking at the first female president candidate. We're looking at potentially the first female president at the same time when female voices from other groups are being quashed. So I feel that you can use this site as part of the community, as a park, as a community center, as a museum, as whatever it could be that serves the community in the now, for the youth, for the residents, but also as part of holding up what came before and the vision that was there in terms of women's voices and women's history. Thank you.
Can I ask if the speakers state their names before they start giving their...
Oh, I thought, okay. Mike Morgan.
Good afternoon, Mayor Devine, City Council, City Manager, and staff. My name is Mike Morgan. I've been in Glendale since 1955, so I've seen little things go around. I would like, concerning the RFP for Rock Haven, I would like the City Council, and I do concur with the sentiment in the room at this moment, to broaden the RFP to comprise a park component, and as has been mentioned today, any other options that are out there and available. Right? If you would just broaden the RFP, I think would be a good thing. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And that's the extent of my cards. our card, so we can begin discussion. Councilmember Garpetian.
Yes. I just want to make some clarifications here because I was the one who asked for this little amendment to the RFP to be implemented, and now this is like it's like I don't want to create this image that the city tried to bring this back again and try to build housing over there, and I hope that the kids are not misinformed that we're trying to demolish this property and build houses on top of it and destroy the history. I think we have to be fair. This was done by me. I take the blame for it, Mr. City Manager, because the way I see it is like you think some of the people think that we tried to bring this back to do something else. That wasn't it. The only thing I wanted to do is add one little component to the existing RFP. And any other ideas from the community and everybody else, I think we went through that exercise once or twice, and we had so many different ideas from different members of the development community, and all of them were turned down. Again, we need to be fair. So this process will get to a finish line. So we can preserve the history. We can bring it back to life. As far as housing coming to Montrose or any part of the Glendale, yes, there are so many rental units coming to Glendale. Some of us, we all have our different opinions about that, but we do not have enough ownership housing in the city. I'm not talking about build the entire city. We don't want to do that. We don't want to build every square foot of the city. But we do not have ownership housing in our city for these children. When they grow up, there won't be enough housing for them to stay here, stay with their families, enjoy the history that they're trying to preserve. They won't be able to stay in this city because we won't have enough housing in this city for them to stay here and live with us. And I have 3 children. I don't want my kids to move out of the city. I want to put that out there. So I'm going to stop over here, Madam Mayor, and I just wanted to mention that I brought this up, and it was not done by the city management or city staff, and there is no other things going on, and let's not be the judge and the jury and the plaintiff and everybody at the same time. So let's move forward and see if we can get this RFP extended, and everything else will be part of it. I think this RFP is wide open, as was indicated by the city manager.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. Mr. Councilman.
And I just want to confess, Mayor Devine, I have such a hard time with Rockhaven. This is a very difficult analytical process that I'm going through. On one hand, we heard that this was one of the premier women's sanitariums, adding to the health of women and giving them a better life and a chance to rest. And one of the options that we have here is to continue that exact same use. But the community, although they say they want to preserve that history, don't want to continue that use. So that has confounded me. The other aspect is when I start thinking with my fiscal hat on, I realize that clearly the best solution for everyone would be if the Getty family came in or the Annenberg family came in and bought this and gave us, even if they didn't give us a little bit of funds, but gave us a little bit of help in making this the park and the adaptive reuse facility that we all ask for. But we don't have that.
I'm looking at them seeing the Ganji family. How about that?
Maybe. So it's really difficult. And in my mind, I know that we have park. We've got the Adobe, Casa Adobe, and that doesn't support itself. People aren't going to drop in enough money in the collection jar to operate it. We need some sort of revenue source. And in my mind is how can we develop that revenue source with the least impact to the open space, to the architecture of the important buildings. And they don't want housing. They don't want a supermarket. They don't want a boutique hotel. Parking is okay, I've heard. So as this process, and we're several months away from a true discussion, all these thoughts are going through my mind, and it is not an easy decision. I mean, we hear what the community says, we hear what the city manager says, we look at the financial impacts, and I myself are trying to envision what a successful project would be that makes everyone happy. But it's difficult, I have
Very
to tell
frustrating.
you. Yeah.
It's very frustrating. Councilmember?
Well, I want to first thank the Girl Scouts for coming. My sister works for Girl Scouts USA, so I will tell her that they were very well represented in Glendale today. But I also want the Girl Scouts to not worry, because nobody is talking about knocking these buildings down and replacing them with something else. That's not a part of the conversation. The building is listed on the National Register. Thanks to the Friends of Rockhaven, it will be preserved. Unless we delay doing repairs and delay doing something with the building long enough to where they fall down. That's my biggest worry. My worry is not that the city is going to come in with bulldozers and build something over it. So don't worry, Girl Scouts. That's not going to happen. I think that the thought is what happens to these buildings going into the future. And there's two different and today it's not even the conversation really for today, because all we're doing is sort of throwing it out there to the development community and saying, hey, who has a bright idea of a way to come in and do something with the empty lot portion so that we have the money to renovate the other side of it, or figure out something else for that other side. So there's two different things that I think people need to keep separate in their minds to some extent, although both could be at play on this site. There's parks, and there's always need for parks, and then there's historic sites. And they're different things. Sometimes they're in the same place. Tukmagian has a historic building that also has a very large park along with it. But the majority of historic buildings in Los Angeles, or I'd say probably in the country, the majority of buildings that are listed on city historic registers, on state historic registers, like Rockhaven is, are not parks. The majority of those buildings are used as buildings. Whether it's the Bradbury building in downtown LA, that's an office building. Whether it is, we were talking at one point about the cannery in Anaheim, which was an old, or the packing house, in Anaheim, packing house, that used to be a packing house, an industrial building that's now that lifestyle center, that's got shops and a food court and that kind of thing. And the whole community uses that building, and there's a lot about the history in it, but probably a better use than if it was still a cannery, for the community. So that's adaptive reuse. So adaptive reuse is taking a building and figuring out what it's going to be, but preserving the building, but allowing it to be used as a building. Sometimes buildings like that are turned into museums. It doesn't happen very often, actually. If you look at the number of buildings that are listed on state and local registers and look at the number of those buildings that are museums, we have a few in Glendale with our Adobes. They're not open very often. A lot of people in the community haven't been to them. They're open sometimes. Sometimes people go. Sometimes they're used for things like the Glendale Beautiful Lunch or, special events. But those are essentially house museums. They're not open all the time because the money to actually have them as a real museum where people go every single day or even go on weekends is really, really high. It's a very high cost. The idea of this project supporting that kind of a museum where it's open every single weekend with docents, that's going to be probably a long shot, quite honestly, for this community to afford. And if they're not, if they're closed off on the inside and every now and then they're open, that's certainly an option. But the other option is to find some use for those buildings, that the public can get into those buildings on a regular basis. Whether it's, at one point they talked about the library. There's no point now moving the library because the fire station's not expanding. But that would have been an adaptive reuse, because they're not now a library, that you would preserve the buildings but use them for something different that would allow for public access. So I just want the public to think about all of the different things that these buildings could be. Museum is something, but again, a lot of historic buildings are not museums. Most of them are not, and they're perfectly fine examples of preservation. In fact, if you look at the LA Conservancy's own website, if you look at their preservation awards that they do every year, I'd say 95% of those projects are adaptive reuse projects, taking a building that was under threat, usually of some kind of demolition or neglect, and then finding another use or another owner for them to renovate the building and keep them going as a building. And then there's the empty lot portion of this, which is where a lot of the debate is around. What happens to that? And that's where the park part comes in, right? Does the community think that that's, obviously people would love to see that as a park. Or do we use that to build something, whatever that something is, that then will pay some of that money to use towards renovation of the other side? And that's what we're talking about. And that's where the disagreements are happening. But the disagreements are not about whether we save Rockhaven. that's going to be a given, I believe, whether it's adaptive reuse and some kind of use. Joanne at one point was interviewed by the news press talking about Rockhaven, and when they asked her what she would like to see, she mentioned something about shops and restaurants. That's that adaptive reuse sort of lifestyle. I don't know where that lifestyle term came in because it's such a strange term, but shops and restaurants, that could be a use for the site too. Or some combination, community buildings, a place for kids, a coffee shop, something that's more commercial that helps, keep some money flowing in. Those are all options, and mix and match. So right now all we're doing is we're throwing it out to that development community and seeing, is there someone that has an idea that maybe the community would like, or if not love, but at least accept, to put some money into those buildings and renovate them and have some public access or a lot of public access and that side, and preserve the gardens and all of those, because I don't think we want to see anything that doesn't preserve all of that, but maybe uses that empty lot for something beyond a park. That would generate some revenue. So that's the discussion that the community is having. And I don't think that there's a lot, I feel this adversarial relationship, but I think we're all kind of trying to get to the same place, really, which is preserve those buildings, have some public use, and find a way to finance that as we go forward. So that's what we're looking for, and maybe we'll get it in this round, and that would be great. I think we'd all be very happy. So
Councilmember Sinani?
That's where I am.
So I just want to get this done.
Okay.
I think we're all...
Is that a motion?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll move the item. But I do share some of the sentiments expressed by Councilmember Najarian. I mean, these are like obvious issues that are out there. I mean, there has to be money to fund things. I mean, with one side of the mouth, we're saying we don't want development, we don't want more houses, we don't want... I mean, literally, one of the speakers said that, and then some of the funding that we get, like we do in downtown, is through the development, the impact fees. Without those fees, we don't have funds to send to the parks. So one or the other. I mean, which one is it? So sometimes we have to be realistic about these things, and we as council members have to act fiscally responsible in that matter.
Well, and I just want to say that in my brief tenure the last few years, I haven't been involved in this discussion as long as Councilmember Najarian and probably Councilmember Sinani and Friedman, but I sense the frustration, and I just want to say that I think we all have good intentions. The main thing is to preserve the integrity, the historic integrity of Rockhaven. We are all committed to that. The RFP is committed to that. We want to find the best use for the property, and we also want to find the best use that the community is interested in and would support. And so I think, and I also want to reiterate what Councilmember Friedman said, that we're not replacing this, we're not tearing down the buildings, we're not building apartments on top of these buildings there. It's not like that. I hope that at least today you've learned that we're not out to destroy Rockhaven. We are out to preserve it. We are out to save it, make good use of it, and to do something there, a project that the community will enjoy, and that we will maintain the history of that property. So with that being said, I would support a motion.
Okay. Is there a motion? I'll second the motion.
No, well, there isn't a motion.
There is a motion.
Oh, you made the motion? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Did you make one?
You asked me if that was a motion. No, I guess Councilman Garpetin said if that's a motion. It's a motion.
To revise and expand.
To revise and expand. Yes, let's broaden our horizons and expand our tent. To anyone who comes in, if it's a good idea, we'll embrace it.
Just so the record is clear, that any proposal will be acceptable.
Or do you want to go with the proposal for the development and the park?
Development and the park. I mean, again, something's going to fund the park, right?
Okay. All right.
Or I mean, if there is a version of this where there is no development and it still funds the park, I'm all for that too. Right. I just can't see how that's going to happen. But yes, let's make it even more expansive.
From our city manager.
All right.
No?
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to revise the RFP. Mm-hmm. Roll call.
Council members: Friedman.
Yes.
Garpetian.
Yes.
Jarian.
Yes.
Onion.
Yes.
Fine.
Yes. Next item.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.